sitting with today?
We are sitting with, I'm Kimberly Bowie, Ihadivo, and this is my brother.
James Smith Bowie II. Don't cut the Smith.
Nice, nice. And what neighborhood are we in?
We are in the Independent
Independence
Heights. A lot of people call it Studewood.
Studewood.
Yeah.
And I heard Independence Heights is the first black incorporated town city
Mm-hmm.
in
In Houston.
Houston.
Yes.
Are there any other cities that were black and incorporated in Houston?
I don't, not that I know of. I don't
Yeah.
think so. I think that is our uniqueness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you're the first and only.
Yeah. The neighborhoods of the fourth wards and the third ward, they were done before, I believe, Independent Heights, but they were in the city limits, so they didn't give them the ability to be corporate. I'm sure they probably wanted to, those former slaves that put that together. But as they started to sell the property out towards, I'll call it the North Line area. Many people know it, I-10, I-10 North. Pass in between I-10 North and 610. That's what we call affectionately the Heights or the Highland. And I believe it's 8 or 9 actual Heights areas. But the area that's the furthest north, which is after what's now I-45 610, the 610 cutoff, that becomes what we call Independent Heights. And that's where all the blacks who worked during that time, for many of the Jewish and white that worked out of downtown, they would congregate there, and then they would go work in downtown, in or around River Oaks, in or around at that time Third Ward, which was predominantly had a lot of white, a lot of Jewish people, a lot of blacks worked in the housing industries, like making up beds and cutting yards and doing menial tasks, and then wherever they could work in between here and downtown. So we're from that area.
Gotcha. Okay, now, so that is where we are right now. Now, tell us so that's the geographical location in Houston we are. Where are we physically being housed at right now? Whose space is this? And tell us more about this dwelling that we're in.
Well,
side note, I had these same floors in my
yeah, we're in one of the original dwellings of, I'll call it the Montalbano Estates. Uh, Many of us, as we were growing up, we knew of the community location called the Knights of Columbus, which is an Italian-based organization. So originally, I believe this area started off as a pecan plantation, evolved, and the Italians either controlled the land or bought the land, and they made kind of a stronghold, and this would have been their suburb to downtown, their woodlands back in those 30s and 40s and 50s. And then with the advent of segregation, the black community that I talked about that was Independent Heights started to expand. And as it expanded, the Italians moved further out. They sold a lot of the property, and a lot of this became what we now know as Studewood, the Cross Timbers, the North Main, the Yale area. And for many people that know from Slim Thug to all the other rappers that talk about the 4-4 bus line, which extends all the way into Acres Homes and all the way past that into Antoine, Eisenhower type areas. Originally, that bus line was developed to get the people from this area back to downtown to work for those people. So that's why we the original folks. The original North. The North stop here. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
There we go.
And so those that know, and much of the development of this side of town, as you know, during the Depressions, I-10 became 610. It expanded. I-45 was the old Chisholm Trail. It was coming into town, but as they put the freeway system in, we started fighting for our rights, and there were really, it was the leaders at that time in the community. My grandfather was one of those main leaders. His name was William Bowie, affectionately known as Pastor William Bowie, and he was known by our church members as the Eagle. And he, along with, I believe it was M.L. Price, one of the Reverend Prices of the pastor Prices of that time, and Carl Barnes, actually the funeral director. They all fought to get the roads paid on North Main and wide, to get the bus service fully extended. It went from 30th Street all the way to the railroad track, then the railroad track on into Shepherd, and then they kept pushing further and further, which later people like Sylvester Turner and Barbara Jordan, Sheila Jackson Lee that fought for those same rights they later gerrymandered out the 18th congressional district that we're all the members of. But
so Independence Heights is
it's always been
it's
right
a
in the
city
thick of that.
that
Yeah,
has
yeah.
so we think
Blossom.
about so I think about like Emancipation Park and the park itself being this city,
Yeah.
right? This space
Right.
that everybody was able to come to collectively
Mhm.
and gather safely, whatever that means for that time.
Yeah.
Right.
And then how those offshoots have gone everywhere, similar to a Freedman's Town, and how those offshoots have gone in various places. Then we think about Independence Heights, and from what I'm hearing now, Independence Heights is kind of like the best of all of those worlds.
Oh yeah.
Especially because
We claiming the best on the north side, but there was several. I mean, definitely you can't cut out Third Ward. I think both of those, Third Ward, Fifth Ward, Fourth Ward, Independent Heights ran neck and neck with each other, and most of those communities, even I'm actually a preacher. I'm a reverend at my church, True Light Missionary Baptist Church.
Go
True
play.
Light,
There you
the healing place. Pastor Anthony
Yes.
Fabian Halley is our current pastor. The second, our pastor, my partner, and a good friend of mine. But before that, it was my grandfather. Then it was my uncle John William Bowie, and so they really pushed the envelope. For that, there were a couple of preachers before that, and I think the church spun out of Greater New Hope, Good Hope, right there when you go over the track. So there are, I believe, 26 to 29 churches that are currently open in Independent Heights. Well, people say, well, why are there so many churches per capita per block? Because nobody had a car. These are the types of things that our young people don't understand. So the bus, it was like New York is today. You had to ride the bus to get around. A car was an unheard of thing. Later on, when we come about, I'm born in the 70s, people started having cars. You started living this American dream. People started working. But you could imagine coming out of segregation, people are walking. So that's why they would put those churches not too far from the neighborhood so people could walk. And then they'd walk to the bus stop. If you go down North Main Street, you'll see church after church, different denominations. You'll see Kojic, you'll see Baptist, you'll see Methodist. One of the most famous and oldest churches was now it's an apartment, but it was Concord. Concord, that pastor there went to school with Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King would come to town, and he would either go to Reverend Lawson's church at Wheeler, or he would come and preach at Concord. That was how, and they all knew each other. Those guys went to school, and then that group of preachers, and like I said, you look at like a Carl Barnes, you look at Pruitt Mortuary. Those guys were the people who buried everybody. And then, a lot of self-made business. You had Barnett's Barbecue and all those places that are right there, and just the whole.
And before our time, it was really a city. Like they had doctors, they had lawyers, they had all the main things that you need were in the community.
Yeah, even the barbershop.
So you would go to, like, the church was the safe haven, and then all of these people were able to set up businesses, and they would support the church. The church would then support them. So it was more like a community, because everybody lived in that area. So that little city was their safe haven.
Yeah, and the church was an anchor
So
institution.
you
got a church here that you can build, but the people are coming in.
Yeah. And
a church, so from a business perspective, you can put your businesses.
You can put your businesses adjacent. You dealt with blacks. One of the ladies you worked with, she's now deceased, Tanya DeBose, did a great job of going and getting landmarks and a lot. So for Jackson's Barbershop, that was one of the last things she did. That's a historic barbershop. Reverend Jackson cut everybody head. His son's still living. took over the shop. But Reverend James would go in there, you'd have all kind of preachers from every church. You have all kind of the barbecue man, the yard man, and everybody. And even when people moved to the suburb, those people who grew up in Studio would come back Saturday morning at 9 a.m. It would be just like that Ice Cube movie, The Barbershop. Everybody getting their hair cut. Yeah. So that was, and you had a lot of spinoffs from that. The other little barbershops all worked there at one point in time. So you had a lot of that going on.
Nice.
Yeah. And then even for like the women, just from the women's side, or stories that I've heard, is that the churches were opportunities for them to come together. And they would sew and they would cook and they would do all these things, but it wasn't just for like their daily job where they go do it for somebody else. They come back and do it for the community.
Yeah.
So you could get I think schooling, so like they make all your uniforms, they make all your clothes, they even figure out how to make your shoes. And it was like a party, you know, hey, okay, so-and-so's kid is growing up, but let me use those shoes, we're gonna fix them up. Here you go, some new shoes.
So one of the
medical part,
I was gonna tell you. So, you know, we talk about Obamacare. So of course we didn't have Obamacare, we didn't have nobody's care. So what the churches would do, in particular, I remember True Light. We've got our current building off of 610 in North Main, right there on that corner of the rock structure and the glass structure. But before that, before the freeway came through, it was actually 2 or 3 blocks up, almost sitting. Part of it would have sit in the freeway. So they actually paid William Bowie to move that to where the current location is. And they bought that location and moved it. But prior to that, that was the immunization place. So a lot of people who were older than I am, I'm almost 55, but let's say people who are 70 and 80 years old, they can tell the story about, oh yeah, no, we would come to the church. That's where you would get your immunization. You go up the stairs and you go down to the basement. They'd have nurses in there. The lady, you know, the white hat, you know, the Baptist from the Cody, they had the people dressed up, giving you your shot and checking you for your cold and all those types of things. And then if people got sick, if people got hurt, that's how it would come. That's how they could keep track of it. You know, so it was, you didn't have computers and what all of the advancements we have now. So you had to do it by word of mouth, by writing it down somewhere, and they would have those immunization records.
And our grandfather, the other thing about Pawpaw is what we called him, was that he was a longshoreman. And so that he worked, before he came to be the pastor, he was already kind of in a leadership role. So something just to share for our young people that may be hearing this is that we are leaders. Like we are able to run things and be organizers and we don't have to have what we think we might have to have. Like we already have it. It's in us. So my grandfather was this just super leader, and everybody would come to the church for that leadership. So not only just the biblical direction, but just, hey man, you know, stay out of trouble, or don't do this way, or don't do this way. We had, 3 and 6 children all together, or 7? We'd have to count. But one of his oldest, you know, like our grandfather was pretty hard. He didn't play. And so he would come and get you. If you were getting into trouble, he'd come get you and say, hey man, you coming with me, or are you not coming back? You know, like that kind of thing. And so it's just kind of neat to
but I think,
witness that.
Yeah, I think one of the big things then, it wasn't about the hype, you know. So, and it's not to say that even what you're doing, the internet is a great tool to get the word out. But I think sometimes, and I've represented several, I'm an attorney, I got into the entertainment and sports game, represented rappers and stuff. But I think where we got off track was now we've made it only about the hype and not about the contribution. They were about the contribution. It's like, I'm not doing this so much for my name. I'm doing this so we can get better, so my family can get better, so my community can get better. And he was big on that. And though all of those leaders, all of those deacons and trustees that I grew up idolizing and watching. That's what they were about. And like Kim said, he was actually the foreman at the Port of Houston. And so it was the union boss type of person. And so how he built the church, or those people that came to the church, were the workers, the laborers, the painters, the construction workers, the people who unloaded the boat. All of those people, he would talk to them. They had their own problems, just like all of us. They had their own money problems. They say, all right, preacher, we're gonna come and check you out. And that was how Independence Heights was really a community of workers, really that blue collar, work hard community. And as it grew over time, that's how it really got put together. So
let's stay there a little bit. So tell me about how your family ended up here in Independence Heights and where Independence Heights was in its growth trajectory then, right? So if we looked at it from I'm a business person, so I look at it through a business lens. Startup, right? Like, so is Independence Heights in like
startup phase is about 20 and 30, 1920, 1930.
Okay.
Our families, our church members start to come in right about that time. I don't know if the Bowies exactly. We were a little bit later because he was coming from Willis, Texas, and he had grown up in Houston, but he got established, like I told you, he was working at the port. He gets called to that church in his 40s. So it's probably about 40s or 50s when he's really getting going as a leader.
And not yet in Independence Heights.
Well, about that time in Independence Heights. At that time, Independence Heights is up and running. So let's say not in the 20s and 30s so much. They've got another group who's leading and growing, and the founders, and I can't think of the one guy's name who's on the billboards that kind of used to push so hard. But those were those original founders who the first guy was the mayor of Independence Heights. Those types of folks.
So that happens 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
Your grandfather gets here 40s.
Yeah, I would say he really gets going about 40s and 50s when he gets known. And
what is he known for at that time? What is he doing?
He's now becoming he's a full-time pastor, but he's also still working for a while. Okay. And then he has a group of children, and they live right after the railroad track. They have a house. They live actually in Independence Heights, and he'll later sell that property to the family of the Thomas family, who actually is a big cornerstone group of our church, members of our church. And he knew their father because he was a laborer. He really great painter and construction guy. And so they end up taking over those properties. And my grandfather moves actually to the 3rd Ward, moves off of Southmore. And but before that, you had some other families who were here, and we looked at 20s and 30s census records. One of my godmothers, name was Ivory Arnold, and her family. What was that family's name? The underlying family. They were basically the Zumo family. They were like doing stuff like selling hair. Back then, could you imagine? They were selling hair products, not necessarily hair, but they had their own natural mixture of grease and pomades and whatnot. And you had people who, like she said, could clean and sew, and so they were one of those groups that were right there. Burris Elementary later comes up right there off of 33rd, and so and then you have the park right across the street. So a lot of people grew up in Burris Elementary. Later becomes a school that's focused on the talented and gifted in music. So you had the Hubert Laws, the Laws family, all those jazz musicians, Jennifer Holliday, all those people coming out of Burris, and they were trained by Sister Lee and these independent people who would teach you how to play the piano and play the saxophone. And then you had people like Leroy Brackett, a member of our church. They could do it off of just literally, they didn't have any sheet music. Imagine these people being taught to play music just off sound, that type of talent. So you had a lot of talented people, a lot of people moving in from different areas and really contributing, just a mix of different families, a lot coming from Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, all those country folks coming in.
And this is around the
40s. This is more like the 40s and 50s. 20 and 30 more like the laborers. They start, but you like
Still dirt roads, it's still
Yeah,
gravel.
still
You don't
dirt and
have the
gravel.
big churches. You
But
just got houses
here
where
is
they
the
have church.
the
So
main.
what's the first big church?
Well, hold on. Let me before I get that. Let me give you the main tip. So you hear the word Studewood. There was a fellow by the name of Studi, and he owned this wooded area, aka Studewood, the street, Studewood Street. That's in there, right there. And
Is
so
he black?
he's a white guy,
White guy. Okay.
but he's selling these 50 by 100 lots. These small lots, but they're deep, and then they would put two lots together. They would sell for like 500 a piece. So when he gets to the Independent Heights side of it, he and other developers, these white developers, would sell that to the black people for the 500, let them finance it, and that's how they got all these lots. And then they would take those brick mortar, not even brick, those blocks, and they would drop them into the ground as the anchors, and then they would get that, and then your house would sit on top of that wood. Cinder blocks, that's the word I'm looking for. And the wood would sit on top of that, and then you'd have a little porch going up, and then you'd have a 1 to 2 bedroom house. But you have about 10 people living there.
Right.
But you had a lot of yard, and you had just your standard hurricane gate about 4 feet off the ground. And man, that was what most, you see that development all throughout the community. So, and then most of those people were laborers and whatnot.
And they would have 2 doors, because one of those doors would lead to a room that you could rent out. And then the rest of the house was for the family.
Yeah.
So if you go into the houses, like we have a few people that are renovating, but it's always like, why is this door right here? But we learned that from Miss Arnold. She said that front part was what they used to lease out to other people when they wanted to make some money, or if they needed somewhere to stay.
Yeah, a lot of people in and out of the wars. They were coming back home. At that time, blacks, that was the way, to get your benefits, to get a loan. My father himself bought this house on the VA loan. He was working for, he had gone to Compton Community College, played basketball, came back, went to TSU. And then his basketball career, he got some little disease, he couldn't play anymore, became a business major. Later got his degree from TSU in accounting. And he worked for the Honorable Mac Hanna. So Mac Hanna owned the Black Bank, the Riverside Bank. You remember that? So Jim Bowie was working there. Later on,
Jim Bowie,
that's my father.
That's your father.
Before
we tell
before we get there,
let's go back to your grandfather.
Okay, grandfather.
You're
trying to stay focused. Okay, so grandfather's coming from the port. He continues to work at
Where's he living?
He's living.
He
lived in Acres Home before he came here, is what you saying?
I think so.
Okay. According to her,
because my daddy used to talk about catching the bus and then having to walk like 4 or 5 miles and doing extra stuff. So I believe they lived there for a little while. I think they had a cousin. That's where the Prophet people come in.
No, Willie Prophet
that lived out there. Okay. And so I think that's where they stayed. And then they moved
over by the
your grandfather's parents from Houston as well? Your great grandparents?
They're from Willis, Texas.
Willis, Texas.
Yeah.
So they were born in Willis, Texas.
They were born in Willis, Texas, and the story goes that either his father or the uncle killed the white man in an argument. They had to get out of town, and they got in a wagon. And he was a kid at that time. He was under 10 years old. All he remembers riding this wagon all the way to Houston. And then the story goes that Willie Prophet, Minnie Timms, who later is, what was the uncle? I forget they got married to, but they end up basically staying in and around the north side. But these would have been country-like areas. So you would have had same type of house we talked about before. You'd been raised up, 10, 20 people coming in and out. And then finally he gets a job working labor. Then he gets a job and develops himself at the port, teaches himself how to finish reading and writing. And that's how he starts his year. And so he goes from the port to being a full-time preacher. But initially,
his own church, or did he get
at True Light? So initially,
who founded True Light?
A group that splintered off from another church that was in Studewood. So True Light is approximately what 90 years old. We just celebrated our 90th anniversary,
Hmm.
and so, but there are churches who are over 100 years old that are in Independent Heights, and so I believe it's called New Hope. Let me verify that for you. The church that's I was saying that's right after you go over the train track right there on North Main. So red.
So your grandfather comes from Willis to Houston. Potentially settles in Acres Homes in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Gets a job at the port at some point in time. Builds himself up there. Gets an opportunity to be the pastor of
True Light.
Light.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But True Light had already been founded by a group of seed members.
He was the fourth.
And he was actually the fourth, but he was the other guys hadn't stayed longer than 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha.
So yeah, he was the one that
He's
really
the first long-term
pastor.
38 years maybe. I'm looking for the history.
No
So
problem. I
we get
love
it
it.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
New Hope is located at 7818 North Main Street. It's
Okay.
Greater New Hope. Let me get you the correct title. Greater New Hope Baptist Church.
Well, you was an attorney,
Yeah.
and you was definitely a reverend.
Yeah.
You get the appropriate, you're gonna enunciate it properly. You're gonna make sure. I love it. Now, okay, so when was this house built? Because you mentioned this is the house y'all grew up in.
Yeah,
when
this
was
house
this
was
house?
probably built. You think in the 60s?
No, I know what it was.
When did y'all move?
No, let's go back to when it was built. So, to give you an example of when the Italians get going there, this house was built in 1963.
Okay.
And
How
so,
long have Italians been here?
so the Italians, remember, I told you, had taken over this neighborhood. And so they probably were living here like in the 40s, 50s, but they really built this side of the street. There were two houses on the main street. They were built earlier in like the 50s. And then there was a big house where the Knights of Columbus and where now Amigos meat processing plant.
Okay.
Those were like more like plantation like houses. They were built early 1900s.
Okay.
So when they built and developed this side of the street, they created a street that connected the cross timbers, and that would have been in the early 60s, kind of with the urban sprawl. So think about it, in Houston, development booms in the 50s. And so 50s and 60s, this is part. So, but what they wanted to do was keep their own little suburb nook.
Within Independence Heights. So the rest of Independence Heights looks like what?
So the rest of Independence Heights looks like on the south side of the railroad track. The railroad track was really the dividing piece at that time in the 50s and 60s.
For Independence Heights.
For Independence
So
Heights.
it broke it up into east and west, or north and south?
Think of it in north and south. North and south of the railroad track, but north of 610. Right after you exit 610, then you're coming off and you're exiting on the North Main, or you're exiting right into Independent Heights.
Okay.
Yeah, once you get to the railroad track at that point, that's the end of it.
Okay.
It's just from the railroad track over to where the freeway was, which probably would have been like a 29th or a 30th Street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And really, if you want the Heights, there were a bunch of blacks that were living at one point on the south side of 610. Later in the late 60s.
I want to reframe this a different way
Okay.
for people who won't have a map with them.
Okay.
And so, like, y'all know
All right.
We're going to come to that in just a second. So, y'all know it. So, here in the most lay terms, right? Independence Heights initially starts as a small, it's what, 5-6 blocks by a few, like it's a smaller.
Let's call it a 10 to 15 block area.
10 to
10
15
by
block
10.
area.
Yeah.
Now, that founding of Independence Heights,
right,
is that majority black?
That's all
Yes,
black.
That's all black. Okay, now, when did it start changing?
It won't start changing until literally the
80s or the 90s.
late
the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay, now,
Going into
this
the
piece
2000s.
of Independence Heights that was majority Italian, this area.
Right.
That
So
we're
this
in right
wouldn't technically even probably be called
Independent
Independent Heights
at
at
that
that time.
time.
That may be where the disconnect
Okay,
is. That
gotcha.
I'm really. That's why I'm saying that railroad track is the probably the first cutoff. Then Independent Heights expands in the 60s and 70s to go
Cross
up to
timbers.
Cross Timbers.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then that is going to include this area.
Yeah, and then that's how our
Okay.
area gets included. Because
Okay.
as that expands, then those who are past it start to sell to black. So again, built in 63, the house, my father buys it in 74.
Mhm.
So so you see that 10 or 15-year
Yeah,
period. So think about it. So in 60, if you would drop out of a time warp in 63, you would come up to the railroad track, and probably from the railroad track all the way up to 20, we'll say 23rd or 24th, which is actually before they build the freeway, which would actually take you almost into what we call now the current heights,
Okay.
notwithstanding the Victorian Heights community that is.
You give them too much
Okay.
information, we get lost.
Okay.
Thank you. Somebody gonna map it all out. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna map it. I'm grabbing photos from
Yeah.
those things, but
Yeah.
I think that this is
Starts off
all
small.
for a deeper conversation.
Yeah, starts
to
off
like
small, expands, and then what happens is Houston in the 60s starts to expand. And so what the argument or the friction
Mhm.
comes, do we stay as an independent black city? Do we stay as our version of Independent Heights? Or do we allow the city to take us over? We allowed for the city to take us over with the leaders going in and negotiating. We needed trash pickup because now we're more than just 5 streets or 10 streets. We're this group of people that expand many streets. We also need the bus line, which is the lifeline of our laborer workers who work. So, AKA, that's why the 4-4 is so important.
Gotcha. Now, bus line, annex, better yet, annex happens around what time?
The city annex is Independent Heights. I'm not quite sure. I want to say in 60s, like right after.
Before or post civil rights?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
If not, it's okay. But
Yeah.
somewhere around
We'll
there.
have to. I don't want to give you the wrong day. We'll have to do
Yeah,
some
no,
research on it.
Yeah,
I got a
that's
book.
fine.
But
somewhere at home.
Okay.
I'm trying.
it's important though that it's pretty much part of segregation and the movement. It's kind of
Yeah.
like it's almost like segregation and the movement in the civil rights is happening at the same time as Houston is expanding.
Mhm.
So think about
Yeah.
Houston being a podunk cow town into the 50s. The port of, and this is where the port comes back. Going back to my grandfather and those workers, the port of Houston is now starting to boom.
Yeah.
It starts to
The
go.
port, it sounds like the port of Houston is what the energy corridor is.
Right,
Like,
right.
Houston would not be Houston if not for that port.
The
And you could argue, if not for your grandfather's offerings, like what his leadership
Yeah.
and all of those things, like at the port.
My
for those
grandfather
workers.
and pastors such as him, because there was the church held a big role in the black community at that time. There really weren't that many independent leaders. Similar to Atlanta, similar to other places in the South, the civil rights all flowed through the churches, in particular the Baptist, the Kojic, the Churches of Christ, those type churches, the Pentecostal churches, like those churches drove the mantle. And those leaders,
And they work together.
yeah, and they worked together because those leaders would then all meet together. That's how they would drive the bus. And then once you have the election of like a John F. Kennedy, that's when you have that switch over to now we've got this group, we're getting behind this man, he's going to drive us into civil rights. And then that's when you had that real push with the church and the community push.
We started in our communities first. We
Yeah.
went across the street and grabbed hands with the neighbors.
Right.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't until, and we did this work all simultaneously and
Yeah.
all over the country. We
Yes.
were doing this
Right.
isolated work on this
Right.
kind of network, so to
Right.
speak.
Right.
So I often think about like Freedmanstown. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and I tell people like Houston's Freedmantown is one of many Freedmantowns. It
Right.
just never got named a different name.
Right.
Went with the free, but there are original colonies all over this country.
Yes.
500 in Texas alone that were
Okay.
doing this work independently
Right.
of each other, but connected on some network.
Yeah.
And then we all came together under some mantle.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're watching. I'm probably my hand all in the face. But now we are watching us like this cyclical piece where we're having to go back into our communities and do this work on a grassroots level. Again,
Right.
we saw that with Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
where now it's these individual groups of people holding it down for their neighborhoods, their communities, but then connected through some type of network.
Right.
So
Right.
no, that's good. That's good. Okay, now let's transition real quick. You said you found the history.
Yes.
So
True Light was established on March 16th, 1935.
35. Okay.
And this was, let's see, at that time there was a small and faithful band of 15 worshipers
Come on.
who all attended worship service regularly in the home located at 303 East 34th Street.
Okay.
Let's see, in this home, the Word of God provided the light to guide their path and the love to inspire fellowship.
There we go.
Let's see, the membership steadily increased
Yes, sir.
in recognizing the need for a larger church
Hey,
home.
man, what's
The congregation moved to a new building at 7010 North Main Street. So right now we're at 7102.
Okay.
So this was 7010 North Main. And the main one was Reverend Dickey, who was in charge at that time, or the pastor in charge. And the church was moved to 7102 North Main. And they don't have a year for that. Let's see. So then it says, between the periods of 1935 to 2011, 5 illustrious and capable pastors have led True Light. Among them were Reverends Ware, Earl Graves, F.L. Dickey, and then William Bowie Jr., and then John William Bowie Sr.
Which would be your brother?
My uncle.
Your uncle.
Yeah,
Your
so.
uncle. Yeah, your grandfather and your uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then records indicate that Reverends Ware, Earl, Graves, and F.L. Dickey served a short period during the periods of 1935 to 38. So then Papa came on in 1938. The Reverend William Bowie Jr. was called to serve as the fourth pastor.
Yeah, so in essence, while maybe not the founding member of the church, he's definitely the torchbearer.
Yes.
And the visionary for where you sit. Because your formative years, or the foundational years, happened prior to him, but the formative years all happened
during him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that
he was doing the doggone thing.
That's all right. Okay.
And he built, let me add this part because my background is architecture, so I have to make this note. During his time, he built 3 different edifices. So as James mentioned, the Wood Church, and I have a picture of it here, the Wood Church was closer, like in the area where the freeway currently is, 610. And then he was instrumental in building 3 edifices, a brick church in 1947, a rock structured sanctuary in 1964, and then the glass educational building, which was built in 1969. Now, the thing that I know is that the rock church and the glass church were both, the architect was Chase, John Chase. John Chase is the first licensed architect in the state of Texas. I'm sorry, Black architect.
Nice. Boy, y'all really give. Right? I'm so glad I know y'all.
And so it's still, we're glad we know you too. And it's still alive and well.
So let me give you a couple of, this fills in some of, put that on. So
we determined, while I'm putting this on, we determined that Papa came on in 1938.
1938. So I want to go back. Let's go back through so we can see this history. So
Yeah, walk us through it.
let's walk it through. And I'm using Wikipedia, what they've entered. We know it's not always right, but it does line up pretty much with what I said before. That the black family started to migrate into northern Houston, known as the Independent Heights, around 1908. So the turn of the century. If you think about that,
Oh, hey.
yeah, if you think about that from the standpoint
Don't
of
get a skinny.
you come off the Civil War.
Whispers.
We talking. You started us off talking about how it took blacks to become free blacks, and we had Juneteenth, and so now it takes a while for people to work hard enough to get up enough money to buy property. The area was developed by the Wright Land Company and consisted of small wood frame houses purchased by residents. Those were the $500 lot, the same size lots that we talk about today. Many of the houses were built by black contractors who lived in the area. Same thing that I was saying, that a lot of what the economic development, we were the ones generating our own economic development there. So that kind of, I think what you were saying, we've been sold this bill of goods by politicians and by people that there's this colonizer help. The only colonizer thing that's going on is that at some point Abraham Lincoln, because of the pressure on him, had to sign this to keep the country from backfiring and going back into the Civil War. And so after that, after this time frame, after the Civil War, right before Jim Crow, there's a boom. And so the city gets incorporated on January 25th, 1915. It takes 7 years for it to get going. And it's incorporated with a population of 600. So that supports our 10 block theory. The city had 715 residents in 1920. And your theory, George O. Burgess, a lawyer born in Milligan, Texas, 1876, was elected as the first mayor. So there go those lawyers. Burgess Hall, which is still, there's a monument to it. That's where Tanya can put the historical monuments right there down from our church on North Main, located at 700 East 34th Street. And the courthouse was right there until 1919. So that stayed there. And then we had another mayor in 1925. So Independent Heights, the community then moves to be a part of Houston. Houston annexes it, the former city, on December 26, 1929. The residents hope to this is the key. They hope to receive improved city services, streets, utilities from the annexation. This did not occur. Very important point. That's 1929, the end of 1929. Now, when did you say Reverend Bowie was the pastor of True Light? 38. So you can see how it took this 10-year period. So my father, my aunt, I have one aunt that's still living, Aunt Alma Bowie, and my aunt that just died, Ada Bowie. They are adamant. All the people at the church are adamant that, again, that what happened was that it took these preachers to come together. Even though we were a spinoff of Greater New Hope, we had a great relationship with them. M.L. Price was the pastor, again, with our grandfather, a couple of other pastors and great leaders, everybody that you could think of in the black community that probably is a pastor now. Those people grew up in these churches. They were around these pastors, and there was a movement on this north side to say, hey, we've got to get these services. So there were 40 black-owned businesses about that time, and everything, like you said, from ice cream parlors, cleaning, to a pressing shop, a drugstore, a blacksmith, law offices, electrical shop. It was self-sustained, self-contained. And then once that city of Houston element came in, it was to say, okay, we've got a lot of laborers. How do we get them to work? How do we get normal, everyday practices? The thought process.
If it rained, how do you get from your house to that corner? Because it's all flooded or muddy. Like to a point where you can't get out, so you're stuck in the house. So it was a big.
Even when I was growing up in the 70s, we didn't get the church parking lot paved until like 1980. Because, and I asked my Miss Arnold about that. I said, why y'all didn't have a paved parking lot? She was like, nobody had a car. We were all walking. The pastor and maybe 2 or 3 of the laborers and the insurance man, Brother David, so and so, they were the first people to get cars. And so as it stacked up, then you start. But that's why if you ever notice black churches, when they're originally built, before they come back and build these modern day structures, they don't have big parking lots.
So it sounds to me like if I were to build and I don't like using this term, but there's no way of escaping the oppressor's fine finger, fine mind,
Yeah.
fine print. If I were to build a Mount Rushmore for black communities, they would include a pastor, they would include a lawyer, they would include some type of doctor, physician, something of that sort. Some type of insurance agent. And
Definitely a teacher or a principal.
And
a funeral.
Yeah, and a funeral director.
Yeah.
You know, and so like when I think about businesses, I'm always telling every business you need to fill out a banker, an accountant, an insurer, and some type of legal representation.
Yeah.
And so we think about black communities. You don't need a pastor. You need somebody in the medical field. You need some legal.
I had an opportunity to work for lawyer still living, Craig Washington, who was also our U.S. representative after Mickey Lee and before Sheila Jackson Lee. He's my mentor in independent practice. When I moved back from Dallas working for the firm, Craig Washington, I would sit up and talk about this, and he would say, you know, Jim, when I was practicing, that literally there were only several lawyers. I said, because I asked him, how did you get started? He said, the lawyer, Mr. Wade. He called him Mr. Wade. And I think it's Ned Wade. And so you actually knew the 510 lawyer. You knew the 5 or 10 doctor, and you knew them from here to Third Ward. And so then everybody else was teaching and working and different. And everybody was just, again, trying to get to a better existence, trying to get their children to be better. We really, until we have that boom, you know, we've got Missouri cities, we've got the plantations. The one pastor puts it's a woods. We got all these woods. You got the woodland. All these lands. Sugar land, the woodland. Before the lands, it was the woods. And so that was really how the black community grew. And I think what happens is we have a lot of people who moved here now. Got a lot of people who are not native Houstonians. And so as we fight for certain rights, or they see it's always portrayed like this is just a political deal, or this is just the preachers are just doing this to get money. Most of these preachers did not work. They had to go work other jobs. The biggest myth in the black community, literally my grandfather's house, he had a boat, they called all from working at the port. It wasn't until he got to the point where he had enough money, then he could retire and say, okay, I'm going to be a full-time pastor. Now, he had great people who gave their last dime. I mean, they would give 25 cents a dollar to keep the church going. And you had so many contributors. They literally were putting the bricks in the church. And so everybody who's on that cornerstone, those original members, those deacons, those trustees, those people gave their lives to not only to those churches, but to this community. And they didn't see it as like, oh, I'm not going to do it because these people are not going to benefit. No, I'm going to benefit everybody, and the overall benefit is going to be so overwhelming that it's not only going to touch my children, my family, it's going to touch all of these families. That's what I admire about them that I think we've gotten away from. And because it's such a me thing now. Everybody wants to rule the world. You know?
They trusted God. They didn't believe in all this. Like, I've had a few of them. I remember when I was growing up, I'd be like, or when I started getting old and it was time to start tithing or saving money, and I'd be like, I don't say how do I do that? And they'd be like, you just do it. And you don't think about it. And then you just make it. And I would really be like, wow. And I did it. And I was like, oh, it works. But it was just their way of looking at it and how they did everything. Like he's saying, they put their all into it. Everything they did. It
And I think,
came.
like the importance of churches in that time, right? Versus
Yeah.
some of what we see church to have now morphed into
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like most churches, I remember church being open almost every day out of the week.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
There
yeah.
was something happening at church, whether that was rehearsals or any of those things.
Oh, yeah.
Even if rehearsals were happening, and you just needed a place to be.
Yeah, you
During
could
that
go.
time, you can just go sit in. I remember many times watching people sit in the back of the room while we were rehearsing, just because the kids needed a place with some AC or some heat
Oh, yeah.
or whatever
Oh, yeah.
to be. And so now, when we see that so many things have been moved to online,
It's
and
true.
so you have this huge structure,
Yeah.
which is increasing property taxes for
Mhm.
everybody in the area, but also not paying property taxes. And it's closed
Yeah.
except for 5 hours out of the week. I
Yeah.
think that what you are sharing here is not just a return to community for community, but a return to community for church, a return to community for business. Like, it sounds like Independence Heights really has been and is a blueprint
Right.
for how we can tackle and address a lot of
Yes.
the things we're dealing with,
Right
right
now.
now.
Yeah. You have to have the interaction amongst people. So if you got to have a vehicle. If it's not going to be at the church, then it's got to be the fraternity. If it's not going to be the fraternity, then it's got to be the community organization. What we do is we isolate with each other, and we break off into these little cliques and groups, but then none of them are coming together to work. So it's, well, I got my group, and we raise money for scholars. Well, that's not how you win. How you win is you call me and you say, hey, boy, do you know so and so and such and such? And then I say, yeah, let me call somebody that you may not even know does this or exists. And then I remember during the hurricanes, Harvey, Bishop James Dixon, who grew up in this community. He was around my grandfather, and he's just such a great leader. But the one thing about Bishop and I were sharing stories, and in our sharing stories about the old time, I had a friend of mine who was in Beaumont. And Beaumont was flooded out. They didn't have anything. And Bishop had organized these trucks. The council people came in. They were talking to him. He's like, Jim, didn't you just tell me some people in Beaumont? I said, yeah, Bishop. He said, hey, y'all go talk to him. And we got 2 or 3 of those trucks to go to Beaumont. Just off of just talking and keeping in touch and being concerned for each other. That's what and it doesn't need to benefit me. It doesn't need to benefit you. It benefits us all. And so everybody is on the reality is everybody gets on the take. And I even in my own life, that was one thing when I went back and I answered the call to God. I had first thing God had to get me straight is that, boy, it's not gonna always about you making something off of it. That you got to get into the shared, like, this is what your grandfather did. This is what your father did.
For my community.
Yeah, this is what community is about.
So many times we have definitely been fed propaganda that says self-care looks like isolating me from other people.
Yeah, that's it.
We are misnaming walls for boundaries.
Because
like
we all got our fences up.
Because a boundary keeps me inside. It regulates my movement. It does not regulate somebody else's movement. That is an expectation. Now I can set an expectation that says, hey, I expect you to do X, Y, and Z or not come across this line. But I can't control this line. Does not control your movement. It controls my movement. And so what I'm doing now is I'm putting this wall up and I'm calling it a boundary, but it's keeping you out and it's keeping me stuck in. And so I'm isolating myself under this guise of self-care.
There you go.
And what we know to be true is that I cannot be well if my community is not well.
Right.
And when my community is well, I am well multiply, like exponentially.
There you go.
It's true.
And to your point, like, I think that is, I want to say it's missing because it's still present. It's where we're not prioritizing.
Right. It's not where we're not prioritizing, and we don't have the respect for. The reason why I'm calling these names of these men and these people that help is that they helped me. I've seen them help other people, is because that's how the community worked. And so what we get wrapped up into again is either how do I get a check out of it? What am I getting out of it? Why? What are you worried about? What I'm getting out of it?
Capitalism.
Yeah, the capitalism and
And then
what?
the protection, like everybody is feeling
Yeah,
like somebody's trying to get them
somebody's
or they
trying to beat
gon'
them or get
yeah.
them. And so what happens is what we don't understand is that when you look at the other communities, the Indian community, the Jewish community, even as my sister's married into the Nigerian community, these other nationalities, people, they have a sense of self-worth, but self-worth connected to each other.
I think yes,
Their culture.
and so I am very, I'm trying to find the right word. I don't like
Yeah.
the base level of it. I don't like when black people are compared to any other group of people.
Okay.
The
I
reason
can
being is
understand.
because black
We
people
do
have
have
very
such a,
specific,
and we have
very
such a different
unique,
experience, unique.
complete,
Right.
right? Like, so Nigerians, when Nigerian people come in, it's because whatever it is they want to do, they can't do it there.
Right.
When people come to America, when they come to a city, and they are able to do those things, here they cannot do that because of the things that we have done, that black people have done, those
Right,
things
right.
they have done. And it is a privilege that they get to have
Yeah.
because they are not.
But the
black.
importance of it is for us to understand, and I think it's because we don't know enough about our history, or there's an ignorance that is
We
developed.
don't know that we are those people.
Yeah.
We don't know that
There
we
you go.
are those people. We don't know
Yeah.
that
We
we are
don't
just
know
as
that
smart
it's
as the
okay for
Asian
us
folks.
to care about each
Right.
other.
And we
Yeah.
don't know that we are just as
And
smart
that
as
we're
the
smart.
Asian folks, or that we are
For
just
instance,
as communal.
I have several.
as
I have
Nigerians, or any of those things.
I have several young people that we counsel, that we're talking to. A couple of them are literally functionally homeless, and that is the point. Been trying to get that point home. Look, man, all we got to. But I need you to do this. But understand that once you do this, we can get there. And I think a lot of the reason why they don't want to do this is because this socialism, this community, this concept is so foreign that well, I don't want to do it because then I'm opening myself up to be let down, and and that's probably our fault for not.
And a lot of times we don't know how to be winners of races we've never won.
Yeah.
And so if I ran track and I ran the 400, and I was always the winner on the high school level, on the college, on the collegiate level, I won state, all of that is great.
Right.
I could win world championships, right? That is not the Olympics. And it is a different feeling to be an Olympian medalist than it is to be a world champion, than it is to be a state champion, than it is to be a collegiate champion. And so that not knowing of how to posture myself, of what that looks like, what that feels like in this new space is also a thing.
Here's a story for you from that time. So the church is built, the current church structure is built in 1964, the True Light Missionary Baptist Church. It's the rock church that was designed by John Chase. Excuse me. And what happens is, the story goes as this. My grandfather was like, all right, we've got to move the church because obviously 610 has come through. We can't keep the old church. We don't have a choice. So we've got to do it. Now, how are we going to build this? How are we going to finance this? All these people who would form the basis, when you go to the bank at that time, you've got to show that your members you're bringing in X amount of dollars. So he goes to the bank. He has these members, these deacons, these deaconesses, these trustees, their wives, and they submit their finances. The bank is like, this isn't going to cut it. There's nowhere in the world you can build that type of building. He goes to, and this is what I love when I hear these stories, is that we allow the defeatist attitude to defeat us and defeat us before we allow our faith to work. So he goes in and says, I prayed about it last night. I'm going back to this Jewish banker. I have this saying my Jewish friends know, I call them the good Jews, that what happens is these people, whatever's going on in their lives and their community, that's what's going on. But you can't take the approach that I'm going to go in here and they're just going to step on my neck. You've got to take the approach. I'm going in here, I'm asking and for what I need.
Yeah.
And then
You
I've
ask
got,
in faith and hope.
yeah, and I have to have faith that God is not only touching me, but touching them, and that they will see something light in me that makes them do some things they wouldn't normally do. He literally just walks in the bank. This man, these men says, "Hey man, the Lord told me to come in here." The Jewish fella like, "What?"
And he was suited up now.
Yeah, now he was young people. He was presentable. He did have his stuff in order. So he goes in the back and man says, "All right, fill out this paperwork, this, that, and the other." Then the sacrifice. He and a couple of other the church members, they had to put their houses up. They had to put their literal mortgages up. Say, all right, we're willing to back it with our own stuff. That's how serious we are about this. We're not going to let it fall into disarray. So they said, okay, and they issued the loan. There was no way they were supposed to get that loan. They did not qualify by any standard of mathematics, but under heavenly standards, they did qualify. What I'm saying is we've lost that power of belief. Now, we will believe in some far off stuff like Bitcoins and rap songs and the stuff that we have. But the core things that we have at our disposal, there's some things we have at our disposal that we can do now, but we just got to get more of a buy-in, I guess.
And I think, and that ties into this, right? So when I hear you say that we've lost that belief, but we believe in these foreign kind of things, that's also because part of it is still real to us. We can find an example somewhere. Now, granted, those examples many times are fallacies. They are they're very far-fetched. They are now AI Duke videos.
There you go. They're gonna make you think it happened though.
They are these things, right? That we can point to. What our kids don't have, what I don't have, is these stories.
Right.
And so I can believe again, or I can start to believe because you just told me, hey, so my grandfather made sure that his faith and his preparation was partnered together, and they showed up. And he showed up and he went somewhere, and because he believed in it, he was willing to put everything he had up, and the people he was with was willing to put what they had up.
There you
go. And so this is what it looks like when your friends are saying they're 10 toes down.
That's what it looks like. This is 10 toes.
But if they don't have those
here go two outer examples with that. With that, somebody had to be there in the church to make, because they had to worry about people coming to steal it. Not only whether it be the people, not so much the people in the community stealing, but outside the community, because they would be targeted by racist people, by white, by other people just passing through. The wino, he had a certain wino, I don't know, remember the man's name. He was the lookout. There was a payment that they had to make one time, and nobody in the church had the money. My dad told me, so he told me, get in the car, Jim. And he and my father and my uncle John, they drove to the liquor store. He knew the liquor store man. Went in and he said, hey man, didn't you tell me you want, I haven't seen you in church in a while. I said, oh, Pastor, this. I said, well, look here, man, just give me your tithe. That's how he paid the mortgage. Those were the type of moves that these people were just stalwarts, man. And
our kids do this now. We will pull up. They will pull up and get payment for something. They will hustle something. They don't know it through this lens.
They don't know.
If y'all sharing this story, you are. This to me is theology. This to me is seminary school. This to me is what faith and discipleship and all of those things look like. This is a spiritual conversation. I'm now telling you that I'm now describing for you in detail how scripture says we're not fighting flesh and blood. The exact thing that you are doing now, I'm giving you a different viewpoint to see it through a lens that multiplies it for the betterment of all people in a way that you wouldn't see.
So take for instance, we talk about, there's all this stuff on the internet where they argue about the scriptures of the tithe, what the tithe is, what's this, and we miss so much of that point. It's almost, that takes a whole couple of classes to get through to figure out what's going on. But here's the basic thing. that how else are we going to get it done if we don't come together? In other words, if
Yeah.
I'm giving my money to something, then I'm giving it so that something can go on.
Yeah,
That's the
absolutely.
simple. It whatever we call it, this and that, and the other.
Yeah.
The
It
Lord
just
has,
there's a
yeah,
communal investment that has to happen, and there is a responsibility to said investment.
there you
That's
go.
it.
That's it.
That's
We need
it.
a storehouse, literally
Yeah,
a storehouse,
Let me
a
give you
susu.
one more
Mhm.
example. So we didn't get to talk too much about our mom, but our mother and our father, when they got married, they were what we call a power couple. My dad was into politics. At the time, my uncle was into politics. Then he went to teach and got my dad. They were twins. So he was like, hey, Jim, I need you to run for this office. So my dad ran for like state representative. As James mentioned, he was in finance. So he was like on a different level. He was on a different level. But my mom was in healthcare and she was a nutritionist, and her biggest thing was children. And so she worked at the city, then she worked at Harris County, like during her tenure. But at some point in there,
yeah,
she actually was the developer of WIC.
yeah. So she comes over. Her last name, her family's name is Petrie,
Uh-huh.
right? And so they were in Plaisance, Louisiana, right outside of Opelousas. She went to Southern, the Jaguars, and so she graduated, ironically, with the home. They called it home health degree or home health ed. They had all kind of terms, but they didn't call it. You couldn't be a dietitian.
Right.
That was reserved for the white schools, the LSU. Well, at that point, in '63 or '62, you couldn't go to those schools in Louisiana or in Texas. So she went up to Case Western Reserve in Ohio. My dad moved with her. They lived up there with a member from our church who had gone up there. They set up shop there. She went and got her graduate degree and became a noted dietitian, the official. She was then hired back here in Houston when he returned to Houston. And she worked for the city health department for 10 years, Houston City Health. Then she transferred over to the county health department. During that time, she ended up working in these programs, and they developed the whole structure of WIC. Actually, it was Mickey Leland, and it was odd because it was across party
Sheila.
lines. It was well, yeah, Sheila didn't even exist at the time. I don't know if
Oh,
she had
okay.
gotten from New York at the time. Mickey Leland and Craig were here because they were native Houstonians, and that was a new district that had been created. Remember, Barbara Jordan is the head of it at first, and then Mickey Leland takes over. And then what ends up happening is later on, though, she gets a lot of support from the Republican side. My dad was actually a Republican, and people, and I remember going to Mr. Washington saying, because he's a hard, long-time Democrat, said, now you have a problem me working at this law office? Said, no, because I know your father. Even when we dealt with Democrats and Republicans, said, I remember what Jim gonna fight for. Me and Jim fighting for the same thing. We fighting on different sides of the aisle. It wasn't like it is now. You got these Trump politics. It's something totally different. No, it was just a couple of subtle differences, and you had different parties, but everybody would come together and still be fighting for the same thing. So how are we gonna take care of these children that need this substance, this milk, these basic items? How are we gonna take care of these young parents as this is becoming a problem? But that's when they said, let's develop this program, this WIC program. And so the guy at the time was the governor of Texas, Bill Clements. And so she worked a lot and worked under Bill Clements. Another gentleman I remember was they met with, what was it, President, it was like Ford, but right before Ford, there was another couple of guys. It's funny because we would hear about all these names and the corruption, but still black people would do things like, hey man, I'm not getting that white folk business. So they would still keep their eye on the prize. And it didn't matter what segment they were in, they would still keep moving the community. I think that's the difference. It wouldn't be about moving themselves. It'd be about moving the community.
That
Yeah.
their platform gave space for yielded their position,
Right.
versus pursuing a position to create a platform.
There you
Like,
go.
a platform already exists.
Yeah.
Right.
all of the needs are already here. They've been here.
Yeah.
You got enough to run on. You don't need to create a thing. You don't need to climb the ladder for that. Take this thing and bring it up the ladder with you.
There you go.
You know. So no, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up, you know, when y'all give me half of the stuff in this house, I can't wait to have willing to work it out. You know what I'm saying?
Trying to get our
looking.
music pieces. You
Look,
can't
I
have the
want-
music.
I want all them little black figures.
You
back
can't have
there.
my black picture.
I want this little man right here.
Maybe we'll talk
Yeah,
about
let me put him in the house just for a little
it.
bit.
Only because you're my brother.
I appreciate it. I give it back. Now, I ain't no thief. I will borrow it for extended periods of time.
Okay.
But if you ask for it back, I give it back. I don't have no, But as we wrap up, I'd like to end on two questions.
Okay.
The first is, and I like both of you all to answer, is if you were to sum up independent type in one or two sentences, rooted in legacy, something that everybody needs to know that they need to carry forward. Independent Type's unique addition to the mosaic thread of humanity that we all live on. You share so many things that are very specific to Independent Type, and very unique to Independent Type, but connected to all things, like on a global level at this point, right? Like, and so if you were to sum up Independent Type in one or two sentences, 3, you're Reverend, I give you 3 points. You know, like y'all threes, your alliteration. If you were to do that, what would that be? What would that summation be? And don't worry, the next question is gonna be about future thinking of it. So you get to just be where it is and what it is right now, and then we'll talk about the imagining of it.
Okay.
So,
Want me to go first? How you going? So mine is, I think the word that comes to my mind is like new beginnings, fresh beginnings, and that you have to know where you came from in order to aim and shoot and be able to arrive on the next level. The other thing is that just Independent Heights itself, the people who came here, is related to the first part. They had this certain drive. They had this certain understanding of who they were. And nothing around them stopped them. And it's kind of how I exist. I do a lot of different, over my lifetime, I'm 51, over my lifetime I've done a whole bunch of different things that if we talked about it, or if you just saw me walking down the street, you might say, wow, you did that?
mm-hmm.
So I've done things outside of what somebody maybe had imagined that I would do. Or, like they may have laid out my path. And I'm looking at them like, if Miss Arnold could live in this house, in this neighborhood, and be single, till she was not 89, or I forgot how old she lived to. But have money, have property, be able to work, save, do all these different things outside of what you would think a Black person could do. So that's my second one. Just, beating the odds is, to me, Independent Heights. The third one is, you might not stay, right? It seems to be a place where you don't stay forever, or at least us who came out of it. So many people have come out of it and gone on to do big, beautiful things. And so it's like that big, beautiful start. You get all of these things instilled in you, and then you just go.
Yeah, it's kind of like your first HBCU.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the learning like a mecca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I think first word is foundation.
Mm.
And we're standing on the shoulders of all those who came before us, who put in the real work, who didn't know where it was going to go, but they put it into work just because it was the right thing to do. And perseverance, that despite the racism, despite the conditions, despite the economics, despite even having to deal with the crazy family members, we got people living 9 and 10 deep, and all of the those we don't even want to put up with one or two
Drama.
people, drama. They persevered regardless. And then lastly, I think influence is that so much influence. The other day, I was having a discussion about not only on the minister end, but just Houston in general. There were storied communities in Houston that really drove what we currently, and the structure that we currently have, and especially what we enjoy as minorities, in particular Black. And those communities, Independent Heights is one. And so that influence will always be there, from the 404 bus line to the minority rights and all of the laws on how community setup is for trash pickup, to being able to demand rights. A lot of that got established because we had people who were willing to persevere till they got it done. And so now that influence continues to follow us. And so that's where I think, and then like Kim said, even when people leave here, whether the influence of a Burris Elementary and developing musicians, a Booker T. Washington, developing those engineers, the people who came before us, again, just did so much to enrich us to grow. And then now, it's trying to hold on to that. There we go. Trying to hold on to that and not let it get away in this new modern world.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, and so then my final question would be, what is your hope for the future of Independent Heights? As expansive as you can dream it in this moment.
So for me, my hope is that although the colors and faces look different, that it will still embody family and community, and that people will be able to reach across those lines again and say, we're a community, we can help each other, we're different, but let's close that gap and let's set up an environment where people can still get help, where they can still be supported. And this, to me, just kind of takes it again. Remember, I'm outside the lines.
Yeah.
So mine is more it remaining a strong community, it being able to continue to enrich people, and some kind of way evolve out of this, like, kind of craziness that's going on in it right now. Like, I don't want it to be poverty stricken. I don't want it to be like impoverished. And then you got these fancy,
Right.
I want there to be some equilibrium, and that it becomes a community, that everybody can come together and build each other up.
Yeah.
And it'll just be known as that place.
Like a 2.0 of the Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
The next version.
Yeah. Now you got to know one of my backgrounds is community development, and so it's about people, and not the building. So who cares what they build? It can be a tall house, it can be a office building. It's still a community, and the people still got to figure out how they're gonna meet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's my hope, is that we figure out how to get a community center or something that really is inviting and involves everybody. Yeah, cultural space.
Mm-hmm. Maintaining the influence that it's had throughout, the influence that those in this community still have an influence in the city and what we do, and like she said, in maintaining how we see the family and the community structure of the city should be. And then coming back from that influence and then also just going to the next level of what it's going to be in this evolution, and so at some point we can see some things coming. I think when I used to talk to Tanya DeBose about it, it was like, well, we don't want them to do this, or I said we're probably past that. In fact, even when they've had the community meetings, you'll have people there who no longer live here but still own property, but then they wanted to stay a certain. That's just not going to happen. The developer, I've lived all around the United States over time. Places develop and they become different things. But the question is a Harlem. When you look at a Harlem, when you look at some areas in Chicago, Detroit, those areas that were historically minority, historically black, but do you keep the flavor, that same intensity of flavor? So now let's replace, okay, if we don't, I'd love to see, okay, where's the barbecue place? Where is the Jackson has kept his barbershop going for all these years. Where is that place? Like those things, when you're able to keep those things, we've been able to keep the churches here. But beyond the church, can we get the businesses? Can we get some of the things back? They've done a great job. They got the hood building built, the apartments and the shared living and the affordable living, but getting more things like that where you're not only affecting you're in all areas of the community, those the haves and the have-nots, and then you're able to still be an influence, and then being able to have that independent toughness, but not just quote for the streets. I think a lot of years when we got to the 90s, Studi Wood was like, oh, you don't want to go to the north side, this toughness and this, moving beyond that foolishness into taking that spirit, but then transferring that spirit to those that live here now so that they can be resolute in trying to push us forward.
Yeah. I love that.
There you
go.
Well,
thank you again to the Bowies, to the third generation. The third generation of
Bowie third generations of Bowie in the neighborhood.
You know what I'm saying? Bowie around the block.
Bowie around the block.
So thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
We're
gonna leave. We're gonna end right here while I look around this house and see what I'm gonna take home with me.
Yeah, I think the scariest part now for me is that a lot of people would always say, "Oh, you're the grandson of old man Bowie," and then now I got the fear that they're gonna start saying, "Oh, they're going old man Bowie."
You have become it.
Yeah, I've become it.
Let me add one thing. I just want to add. So my uncle, he actually retired from True Light, and then as James mentioned, Bishop Dixon stepped in to be our interim for a few years. And then currently we have Pastor Anthony Hallen. And what's cool about him, the second, what's cool about him is he's from Detroit, Dallas, and then Houston. So he brings a whole nother level of like how this church can be communal.
Yeah.
And that, we're seeking out ways to be everything but just that church.
Yeah.
We want
because it's not the structure, as we say, that the people are the church.
Yeah.
And not the structure. And so therefore, if the structure disappears, then okay, what are we as the people going to replace it with that symbolize or that can move us forward? Because the structure is just a vehicle. It's just like riding in the car.
And we all learned that during COVID.
Yeah, we learned that during COVID. It's just a place to,
it's just standing there.
Yeah,
it's just standing there.
It's a place to commune, but the community still got to be community.
There you go.
So that's kind of where some of what I'm looking for from the
issues. So, because people always say, "Oh, do all this politician, this preacher, this lawyer talk." Here's a simple issue. Regardless of what community is, like stuff like dumping and just putting trash, like don't come put no trash in Independent Heights. I'll tell you that. If I see you, I'm calling the police. You call me a snitch, I'm calling the po-pos on your tail. Don't come dump no stuff on my side of the road,
Just did it.
Because if we don't have no respect for our stuff, how are we gonna respect the other? That little stuff like that. Or when I see people that I know that's down the street, we've had, like I told you, we've had certain giveaways. I remember J.J. Watt sent a truck, and and 3 or 4 of the church, we all got together. We worked. We got on one church's parking lot. We worked at we just had a giveaway right here up the street on Whitney. What's the yeah, right, Greater First. But when we do these things, it's for the community. And like Kim said, it's different. They're not gonna all be black faces. It's not all black faces different. We're probably a mix now, probably almost 50-50 now. So now it's about making sure my neighbor is all right.
Yeah.
And so that's
because the spirit of the community is the spirit of the community.
There you go.
White people told us we were black, and then that became a thing.
Yeah.
But our identity should not be rooted
Right.
in our blackness. It should be rooted and centered in our humanity.
There you
Amen.
go.
One of the things I tell my nieces and nephews all the time is that if you're ever in a position where you have to choose between your blackness and your humanity, you choose your humanity.
There you go.
Choose your humanity every single time. The
Yeah.
world that you live in will always throw your blackness up against your humanity. You
Yeah.
can't escape it.
Right.
What the world will not always do is offer space for humanity in your blackness.
Yes.
The best
Yes.
way that you can help everybody is if you choose that first.
Choose
Yeah.
And
that.
humanity is I'm gonna help the people in my community. I want
Yeah.
my community well, regardless of the individuals in the community, because we are all better for it. You know?
Mhm.
That is
So,
it. That is it.
All right.
Well,
All
thank
right.
y'all.
Close on that one.
Yeah.